Howdy of you delicious people. I'm here today to create a Power Rangers season. Like, in no way humanly possible would I actually put forth this season into just like, oh, well, how about you just like create the whole show and then do the show and whatever and get sued probably in the near future by anybody because it's bound to happen. Um, because look at Mighty Moshin Emo Rangers, or look at God, what is the other one? The rated R Power Rangers thing, where I think they ended up getting sued putting that out there also. So, what is it that I want to put together here? Like, I want to put something together that's both paranormal and supernatural. And a lot of people would have easily just said, it's like, well, why not just call it like Power Rangers, like paranormal? Or why not just call it Power Rangers Supernatural? Like, that would be the easiest way to go about it. There's other titles that I also went with, like Power Rangers Ethereal, Power Rangers Metamorphose, Power Rangers uh, Dark, because of Justice League Dark. So, but what do I want to accomplish here? So, what do I want to do with these characters? So, really, I would say, like, we could have these characters who, like, their day job could possibly be that they could be taking down a ghostly spirit, and like as if they're going to be Ghostbusters. Like, it's not exactly that same kind of approach. We're not going to have proton packs as their weapon of choice. Um, but there's going to be something kind of like Constantine like about this show. So if a lot of people who are fans of like Constantine and stuff like that, like especially like the animated stuff or like the stuff that they ended up doing later, like that's kind of like I want to approach that and kind of do something like that where we have like a Constantine supernatural show from the CW, like we kind of have that, but we also have obvious like weapons that are going to be introduced here that make a lot of sense to be putting together for a paranormal or supernatural Power Ranger show. Uh, so really, I think whoever eventually the leader is going to be in this one is probably going to have to be this guy who is to have like a ton of just supernatural or paranormal lore compared to everyone else, to where really he's probably going to be like the smart or intelligent guy who's just going to be busting out all this like paranormal whatever knowledge. Like, it's going to kind of feel like Extreme Ghostbusters was, where we have like the Egon in the team, and then everybody else is just like, oh, okay, this sounds cool. Or, okay, like, but how do I take it down? How do I beat it? How do I take it? How do I destroy this? So how we're going to play this out is we're going to use certain weapons that could be very familiar with like certain kind of horror kind of approaches. Like, meaning, like, I think it would be kind of cool to have like UV kind of weapons, or like a UV kind of like blaster, or UV kind of like we can go with like a sword, or like I had this idea of this weapon called the Excalibrator in the other video that I did. You can go ahead and check that out, where like the longer that you like hold this thing and the angrier that you are, the more that this powers up this sword that is going to burst out flame. But I could also just adjust that and say it's like, well, this thing could also burst out flame, but it can also burst out light. So either way, uh, like this attack could be skewed for certain kind of characters, especially if there are vampire-like characters. Eventually, you can bust out the Excalibrator to eventually take out these threats or these foes or whatever. So like UV light weapons is like one of those where it's like every single monster movie, there's always a monster that is afraid of light. They freaking have so many horror movies like Pitch Black, or a lot of things where a lot of characters, their weakness is light and how they want to dodge it or how they want to prevent it. So like UV weapons, like watch the show called The Strain, that of course is a vampire show. but still, like, UV weapons is a thing that they try to use in that show to just try to take them down. Like uh, 30 days of night, like they end up using like a UV lamp in that too to just kind of like forward off somebody. Um, my next thing to do, also for another weapon of a character, um, would eventually be like I always wanted to play around with like the whole like does like if salt does hurt supernatural characters, then what does salt water do? Like, of course, we probably can't have things like crosses on this show or holy water because, like, that's a religious thing and we can't do that. But what if we can play around with like salt water? Like, basically, like the salt water has salt in it, and like so. What if you could have a guy that if anyone has seen like the Young Justice Aqualad thing, you can just have somebody like channel water, and it can either um, like burst, like he can have these water attacks that'll seem like Hydro Man or whatever, or you can have this guy like create these water weapons that eventually turn into like ice, because eventually, of course, like being around ghosts, things get cold, and so eventually, like this weapon can turn to ice and could be like as a chucking device, or could just be like something that you just fight off a enemy with, and then it starts to break because it's flimsy and whichever. Like you can kind of play around with it, but like I was always kind of curious about like, well, like if enemies hate salt, then what would a salt watered weapon do? Like I always just found that to be interesting. Anyways, like you would think that like some enemies would have like weaknesses to the ocean, but I don't know. Anyways, it's just playing around with it. Uh, Also, like tarot cards. So here now I have to like explain my design of this character. This because this is an actual character. Like I thought, like why not have every single Power Ranger have the design of a tarot card? Because when looking at it like supernatural things, and like you get the wizard of a thing, where like and like tarot cards have very interesting designs, and they get very specific, or they get very like all kinds of different designs. There are really just simple tarot kind of cards. Like you can see like certain cards like have like these like hands or whatever, like these hands that are on them. I think it would be kind of cool to play around with those designs, like not basically like copying and pasting every single tarot card, but doing something different where like you could possibly have like hands just kind of on the side of like a person's head, and like you could have like double hands, and like that basically covers one thing. Like there's certain tarot cards that mean certain things that you could go along with that, like love or justice. You could probably even throw in the death card to have a Power Ranger be the death card ranger. That'd be kind of funny. That'd be kind of fun to pull that off. Um, like I know that seems very emo, but like, and I know like this visual right away. A lot of people are like emo ranger. What is this? Nah, I'm not interested. Um, but like I think this would be like the tarot card ranger, or the tarot ranger, where I think he'd probably end up being like the sixth ranger. Probably the black ranger would probably end up being the sixth ranger. So this might be like Dino Thunder or Zeo all over again, or it's like, hey man, why is it that the black ranger is the sixth ranger? It's like, well, because it's fun, because it looks fun. Um, but yeah, like it would create a different element to the show. It would just uh like how we can have like these kind of very intricate designed like characters that people want to figure out like, okay, what do these mean, blah 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 blah. But like I know a lot of tarot cards might have certain kind of like things for a lot of people, where like uh, where it's like, hey, some of those designs on some of those tarot cards are just kind of like gruesome or dark or whatever, but like they can play around with the designs, they can have fun with it, they can just kind of like go into like the crescent moon ranger or the crescent moon ranger that would kind of look cool. uh they can have fun with it. They could like kind of do something different with these kind of Power Rangers that we haven't seen before. Plus, also has like a very much like supernatural approach to this, where we have uh, like of course like we can go into like having one ranger kind of like chuck tarot cards. Like he can almost be like the gambit of the group. That'd be kind of fun. Um, but also, it would be kind of cool to get like legendary artifacts, like how like a lot of Power Rangers get these legendary artifacts. Or it would be kind of cool to get these items that are to eventually power up our characters, uh, to eventually like incorporate certain outfits that have some supernatural connection, that is to eventually give them this like power up or this kind of different approach, so on and so forth. I know this wouldn't work for like a PG show or whatever, but like I think you could like put on like a straitjacket for a character, and all of a sudden the connection of that like certain artifact just powers up the character and all kinds of things. Like you could find certain items that eventually like how I kind of like mentioned, uh, like a genie lamp could probably be an artifact that somehow like powers up a character. Uh, like we can probably also go into uh, like a lot of character. Like I know like a lot of times they have to forcibly have certain characters have certain powers. Um, and they can kind of dip into that, just be like somebody has this like psychic power, or like somebody can move things, or somebody can know things, or whatever. Like that's always kind of the straight up thing to do stuff with. um, and a lot of this also might sound like Beetleborgs to a lot of people, but basically it's kind of one and the same, as far as like, because Beetleborgs was technically created by Sabin, so whichever. uh but yeah, so like who will be like, because I don't have the narrowed down of who all individual characters are going to be. um because really, like, I think that would have to, like, there are certain characters that I want that are going to be like the, like somebody who has probably been immortal and has lived forever. That might end up being like uh the sixth ranger or the red ranger or whatever, like the Egon of the group technically. And like to me, I would kind of expect him to be like this carny, or this person that's just because I have to like rewrite this for a supernatural show. Um, like he could be one of those like monstrous characters that end up being in those kind of like freak shows, or it could be just like a carny who's ending up just selling his like supernatural or whatever ability to everybody in town, and like that might be fun to do. It would kind of be fun to have this be like an animated movie, but like who would want to spend that kind of money? Like I'm expecting it to be like the low kind of like expectations. Um, but yeah, it would kind of be cool if the Red Ranger has this like monsterish look about him, like maybe like a half hybrid between monster and human, and like maybe has certain abilities that when he's not morphed, that eventually he can use to, because eventually people are going to be after him, people are going to be looking for him, because one, he's a monster, but on top of that, like there's probably going to be people just after him just because he's uh, like there'll be reasons. So going on here, so who is going to be the villains of this show? Who's going to be eventually be the other side of the sword here? So I could probably say that I could probably reuse a lot of stuff that I've said in my past. Like vampires, I'm not quite sure about yet, like how I'm gonna do that. Like we could probably like go through any bits of like Ghostbusters video game things and say like, hey, it would be kind of cool to have gargoyles, or it'd be cool to eventually have uh, like certain kind of monsters eventually from like kind of other things that we can kind of use to have fun with it. Like meaning like certain kind of like supernatural ish like monsters that have kind of been known throughout the histories. Uh, but yeah, like it would be kind of cool to play around with a Frankenstein that has this electrified like power that eventually I always wanted to play around with, where like you have the Frankenstein where like his very top of the head is kind of just chopped off and opened, but you have this lightning that is consistently always coming out of it, and so like and he has like electrical like clothes on, and like you can just kind of heavily play around with this character instead of calling him Frankenstein. You could probably call him Frankie or some kind of modification of Frankenstein. You could probably call him Frank or some kind of goofy-ish like thing. But really, like his power is to be like an electrified like character where he shocks people. Uh, Werewolves probably would easily like I could just recycle something that I did from another project where we have werewolves who are to be in these like tribes or these groups that all have these like obvious tattoos, these obvious markings on their shirts, and then you can kind of track down to find out that these characters are who they are. And of course, like we'll probably have weapons that are just straight up made of silver, because that's usually the weakness of supposedly all monsters now, which I just find that goofy. Where all of a sudden we went to like wooden stakes to now like silver kills everything, and I'm like, wait a minute, when did that happen? Like, when is it all of a sudden that like silver just is like the nullifier for everything? That just seemed weird to me, and uh, I would love to try to avoid anything that seems like a gun at all in this show. But I know full well people will go and like, well, like we should have like a cannon or a gun or a blaster or whatever that shoots these kinds of things. Um, or we should have crossbows, or we should have whichever that like, which is fine. Like obviously it would be like awesome to uh one for a lot of people that have seen like the like it would also be kind of cool to eventually have like the piece that you see on the mouth of my like icon character, where you see kind of like these this the slip line, and you have these like circles that are kind of going and making the teeth marks. Like that would be a real cool design to eventually like keep that as like the lip parts of every single one of these Power Rangers, to kind of make them look like a supernatural or a skeleton like character. Um, and plus also so we wouldn't have to do the generic like lip looking like mask of it all, just so that we can just avoid it. Um, or also like they can go without any kind of lip whatsoever. That would be great, just to be doing something different, just to have something like a little bit more fun, or just something that doesn't look like, oh, it's been reused like a bajillion times over. um, but yeah, like a line, and then you just have these like little circular gaps that are to be done as the teeth part. That'd be kind of cool. So but anyways, so who would overall be like the uh like there has to be like a Rita or a Zed, right, in this kind of video? Well, because there always has to be that. One, we can go with any number of things. So one, I could reuse my other story where it's like, hey man, wouldn't it be great to have the Phantom Ranger come back and eventually he's the villain of this show and you find out who he actually is and he's Zordon's son and like we have this whole like me going back to 1984 and like playing around with that sandbox and having the Mighty Morphin like prequel show that I would have loved to have done, but like that's probably never gonna happen because like hey man, we already like all these things are already pre-existing, and uh what could we do brand spanking new? Well, one, we could have this either be the putties of the season, or we could either have them eventually be the villains of the season. Like it seems in a lot of like supernatural shows, there's always these people who are putting together dark magics and are trying to eventually like summon things. So that means we could probably have like we could probably have a witch or wizard, or we could probably even go into having like warlocks or like goblins or like something like that, like trolls or something like that, that is to eventually go and all combine together to be this. I guess you could call them like a monster squad or a monster force or or the darkness. You can call them that. You can call them the darkness to eventually just give them like one slap of a title. Uh, Really, I would also make the consensus that like it would honestly be cool to have these characters just be called the cloaks, where or the hoods. Like the hoods would sound weird, but like you could have just a lot of guys in cloaks. You can't actually see their face or anything like that, and they could always consistently be performing all these rituals to put these monsters together. Um, or also, you can just have them like creating things with ectoplasm to eventually like come up with these monsters instead of having like how Finster kind of did the whole thing with the clay. Like ectoplasm could be this season's like clay molding of a thing. Um, but yeah, like it would be kind of cool uh, to either have this as like a completely paranormal, like supernatural kind of season. Like I think it would just be cool to not even need an actual like Rita or Zed kind of villain if we're not going to do that at all, and just consistently just keep creating uh, these characters that are to eventually just continue to come in and be the next thing that these guys are to take out. Like make it seem kind of much more like a uh, like having these supernatural characters kind of like having to forcibly just patrol the street and they just randomly like go on and find that there is this thing, or maybe they'll have to go and actually hunt these things down and try to find where they are. Because maybe every single time that they take one of these things down, uh, it's another like bill for them, or it's another like thing of money for them to take down, or maybe they end up getting calls, or maybe like what would be the updated version of that? They could get emails, or they could get reports. They could get like things being told that they need to go and clear this location out. Blah 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 blah. Uh, I'm hoping that they don't do an overly cliche like supernatural thing where like because there's obvious ways to just approach the season where it's just like yeah, we're gonna just do the supernatural thing, where we're just gonna like make these guys like have these like absurd looking logos or whatever that basically tell you that they're like the closest thing possible to a Ghostbuster. We're gonna put them in an Ecto One kind of car, and we're gonna send them off. Which I'm like, God, I hope that doesn't happen. Like, I hope it's just like one of those where like we could just like magically like have a lot of like things go on here where we just have these like people like appear at this one spot for one reason or another, or like considering this show is almost gonna be like a magic kind of thing. Like you can teleport people, or eventually you can just kind of have these people just kind of like making about town anyways. Like hopefully it doesn't seem like a Ghostbusters thing where they're gonna like talk about proton blasters or like God, what is the other thing? They're not gonna go into like boson blasts kind of things, which obviously is like, so we're basically just doing Ghostbusters. Like if anything, I don't want there to actually be some like kind of ghost trap of a thing, but like there's also a workaround to also just do that too. Like there's a way to like trap people into stuff. Um, I've seen numerous shows where they've like trapped things into artifacts, or like kind of like putting the genie back in its bottle kind of thing, or like reasonably you could go with uh like if they were smart about this, they could probably do like smart about this. I would have to like figure it out. Like if I was smart about this, because who else is gonna think of this thing? You could probably have there be like a certain kind of book that eventually these things could get trapped in. Kind of like a lot of people would feel like that's like a Goosebump kind of ripoff. Um, or a lot of times people will be like, okay, books kind of been done a lot, but like I think if you have like, because like you have like in Evil Dead, you have like the Book of the Dead, and like certain things like that could probably be your ghost trap. Could be a book. Because weirdly enough, like there was God, what was that one called? Uh, there was this one anime thing that was like Power Rangers where like all of the characters ended up morphing because of a book. So hopefully they don't do that in this show. Like in God, in the other video I said like, hey man, like hopefully they do a time period piece where I hope like a Walkman is kind of like the morpher. Um, that would be fun. That would be cool. What would be the morphers of this one? Like, I think you could probably go on and do. I wouldn't say a book. Like, I would probably have to say, God, what would be the morphers for a supernatural thing? Uh, I might have to pause here to figure this out. Let me pause here for a second. What you could probably do for a supernatural show is you could probably do a number of things. You could have it be that one, like, it could be like a magic word will channel the, for you to be able to morph. But I'm sure a lot of people are just like, hey man, I want a morpher. Like, it's hard, it would be hard to do that kind of thing. Like, and plus also a lot of, like, people like, man, I want something to sell somebody. Uh, like also you can do like you could do the Power Ranger as like a spirit kind of thing, where like the Power Ranger like character could be like coming out of the character and then could come back in and be morphed. Like you could do that. uh I'm sure that's probably how they'll go with it when eventually you actually morph into the character. You could probably, God, you could probably have like certain kind of artifacts that eventually, like, once somebody is to magically find this one goofy artifact, all of a sudden they end up finding out this like legendary, like, hey, this was involved in some like ghostly thing. Eventually, that could maybe become the morpher, and like eventually you could like after like it gets cured of its supernatural thing, you end up finding out that it's a morpher in disguise, and like, oh, okay, like, so like then like the person can morph, and like I think it would be kind of cool to eventually have like all kind of the same morphers though. How do we do that? Like I hope it's not gonna be another one of those like wrist like morphers. Like I would like there to actually be something that you could like hold in your hand and morph, but I'm sure that's probably not gonna happen. Uh like we've done a morpher that is like a wand or a wizard wand, so that's gonna be tough to do that again because people could get sued. Uh yeah, like the morpher is a tough one, especially for a supernatural show. They would probably just have to come up with just like a easy way to just like, nah, just morph. You could have it to where like going into the tarot card thing, you could have like a tarot card that switches into a morpher that is to like that's to be the way to work around it. You can have this card that eventually like every one of them have that changes into a morpher, and then that's how you can do the workaround. You can have like the tarot card be the morpher, and so that's the always the way to work around it. Communicators, I would love for there to be like a communicator, and then like also the morpher, like so we don't have to have like one and the same kind of thing. Uh, like I think now we get to the point where everybody's having things just in their ear bizarrely. So I think a lot of the communicators would just end up being. Uh, I think it would be cool if like the communicators were just sunglasses. Like I think that'd be a cool way to do like communicators nowadays, where it'd just be like some sunglasses that people are just like, oh man, hey, cool shades, and like no one would actually know that it's like a communicator. Like I think that would be a cool thing to do, uh, or just eventually just having like some kind of goofy futuristic like approach or thing or what I don't know. But anyways, yeah, that's like I think blatantly I would probably rip off a lot of stuff that I did in like if I were a Power Ranger show. So there's probably going to be a lot of ripping off of that as far as story goes. Um, I would love to eventually have this kind of like where everyone bizarrely is connecting to like a supernatural thing through this story anyways. Like there could be some people that are to like to just know about this whole like supernatural thing, and like everyone else can play ignorance, and then there might be some people that could be like book readers, bookworms, eventually like know little tidbits about stuff. You could have certain characters that eventually just watch monster movies and they're like, yeah, great, like uh and then you could also just be like some people that know nothing about this whatsoever, and they're just like, man, like I was just kind of like stuck here because I had nothing better to do. Uh, like I would really not want there to be another kind of school kind of thing. Like we could have a horror school. Hey guys, your horror PD like force you to just do that. Um, you could have like one person that might come from like we've had too many future things. We have one person from like a horrid future of like hybrids and humans and whatever, um, that comes back and is trying to prevent something. You could do that, but like we've had that already, we've had that a lot already. You could have people coming from like a monster world. You could do that, I guess. Like we haven't done that enough, and that just spills over to Earth weirdly enough. But I think we've had quite a bit of times where that has technically happened. Uh, but yeah, like I'm trying to figure out what is the best way to connect all these. Uh, yeah. We could always go the easy route and just be like, oh, this is all coming from some book. Like we can go the Evil Dead route, where all of a sudden like everything that is coming up in this book is coming true, and then eventually they have to like seal the book up again, and we could do a whole season about that. Which I'm like, that just feels like we're reusing that from something. That feels like Evil Dead. That feels like something we've reused. Um, because like it would all have to happen at one time. It would just not be the convenient. Like I guess we can go with the occult kind of thing or the cult thing, where we're just having these people just magically like trying to take these things down or trying to channel these things and dark magic them out. We could have people that are to be vengeful people. We could make them like the Court of Owls kind of people, where these villains are all like rich misers or whatever, and they're just like the high part of society that is just eventually just trying to create this ruckus of whatever. But yeah, so I think that's all that I wanted to say here. I'm gonna probably look back at this and regret that I didn't say enough about this show. Uh, like I love supernatural things, and so I would love to just say that that I created something out there that eventually worked, that eventually just did a thing or did something. I know a lot of people might have different approaches to this, and they might have a lot of different ways of looking at things. People might have different like suggestions of like, oh yeah, like we could like you could have like a um like bottles, like certain kind of I don't know, bottles, jars, something like that. Uh, like a lot of people would immediately go the route of like, oh yeah, so we're gonna have like ghost bombs and whatever. Like that seems just like Ghostbusters, where eventually they ended up in that route. Uh, we could probably have like certain like bombs that are queued up to certain monsters, like how they had an Underworld, where you had this like silver nitrate like bomb. Like I guess you could have like a garlic bomb for vampires or whatever. Like I would love to be able to use like all kinds of like vampires, uh, vampires, God, werewolves, Frankenstein, everybody. Mummies would be fun to do. Zombies would be really fun to do if it's done correctly. Because really, it's gonna be like, yeah, we can't really have zombies because we can't like have somebody eating anybody on a PG show that doesn't quite work. It's like, well, like you can modify. You could have it be like it could touch somebody and infect them and make them into a zombie. Like you could have like the touch, or you could have like the scratch or something, right? Like that could like be a thing instead of actually eating somebody, or instead of the actual like sucking the life out of something, you could like touch them and drain the life out of them. Um, like take the Morbius route of things, where you just like somebody could touch somebody and like drain like their life force. Like oh, I would love to do like Boogeyman. Like Boogeyman to me honestly would be like a hero in my like train of thought, or just be like a boogeyman that's not really understood. That like you can have like also these play on like doorways where like that's where all like everything is coming from. We can have like we could possibly have like Boogeyman be like the way of which that the Power Rangers all get around in this season, where like the Boogeyman gives these kids like the key to the city, where they can go on and like use these doors to get anywhere. Like eventually, like the Boogeyman, as long as there's a door somewhere, like eventually the Power Rangers can make it there, kind of thing. Like instead of having to like teleport them in via the normal like Power Rangers thing, because like I think they tried as much as possible to do away with that, so it doesn't seem like Mighty Morphin. Uh, Megazord could probably easily bust out into being like for this character we could have him be like he's the Cyclops Zord, or like we could have like kind of monsters like God, what would it be like Balor, or we could have like God, what were the things that I said something in the other video where I kind of mentioned about Leviathans or Pegasuses, or like some kind of other uh, Valkyries or something like that, where it's just like you have all these like kind of uh, like mythological Zords, like Griffins or something like that, where you can kind of, and I know some bits of these have probably been done before. Like the Griffin, I think was done in uh, one of the Mighty Morphin seasons, where I think the Yellow Ranger had a Griffin Zord. Um, but yeah, but they could redo that, right? Like they've redone like T Rex like a billion times by now. So like yeah, like so that's probably all I wanted to say for Power Rangers Dusk, or whatever that this is eventually going to be called, Power Rangers Dark, or Power Rangers Fight the Darkness, or Power Rangers like Immortals. Let's go with that. Power Rangers Immortals. I don't know what to call this. Power Rangers Paranormal. Power Rangers Supernatural. Uh, but if anything, I would hope for one thing that it'd be really freaking awesome and really cool, and the characters aren't going to seem like some like cliche-ish thing that like Power Rangers have kind of turned into, in all brutal honesty, where it's just like, man, I want somebody to like just be like really dark and freaking like cool and whatever, and like I kind of want like the Kylie Griffin kind of approach of Power Rangers, where you just have the one person that just gets so fascinated by these like very strange stories. Like I don't think that we can probably use words like demons and stuff in here. Um, but it would kind of cool to eventually just have like demons, because I know they use like mutants or mutations or something in a prior season before. Um, but yeah, so here's to ever hoping that there's probably going to be a supernatural or paranormal Power Rangers. Maybe to finally just say like, okay, guys, hey, you guys finally wanted like a rated R or more adult like Power Rangers thing. Well, here it is. Um, I would love for this to like. It'd be cool to either have this be like another season of like Hyperforce, because like that only went to one season and then it like just died. Uh, like it would be cool to eventually have that be pushed out as like, hey, hey guys, remember this show that was like X amount of years ago? Because who knows when this is gonna eventually still be here. Like, hey, we're doing a season 2, but it's gonna be a very vastly different theme, and how we're going to do like a lot more different things. We're going to create our own lore in the show and whatever. But I know Hyperforce, a lot of people are just like, dude, there's never going to be another Hyperforce. Like, obviously, it's been too long. That show was too expensive. Ba 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 ba. I think it would be cool to have this be like an animated, like kind of either movie or an animated like show. You could probably go into doing that eventually, if Power Rangers wants to just say, "Hey guys, here's a more adult version of this," or maybe we can go on and have this be Power Rangers similar, where it's just like it's Powered Strangers or some goofy off the cuff thing that kind of feels like Power Rangers but isn't the exact same thing. I don't know. I would love for there to be just some kind of like comic book would be great. like I don't even like want it to be any kind of huge scale of a thing. Like I'm not thinking live action movie, whatever. I think that's not in the cards. Look at Justice League Dark. That's just a eventual HBO Max show. Um, I think that you could really push this for doing this during October, and people would be really like, "Man, this is awesome! Man, this is cool!" Uh, like I would like a lot of these characters to have these like Constantine like vibes, where like you probably have like teen angst or something like that. Not every one of them have to be dark and brooding. Some of them can play the like ignorant card or whatever. Where it's like, man, like I don't know anything about vampires, and I don't know anything about Dracula, and I don't know anything about this. What is all this? Just to kind of like have one kind of like one that someone can relate to if they want to get into supernatural stuff and they're not very familiar. Blah 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 blah. Like we could like if anything they could retcon a lot of stuff in their version where it's like the whole saltwater thing could work on villains where like you could have never probably have seen that before. Um, you could probably do a lot of stuff where there could be a lot of weaknesses that you probably never heard of before, where it's like, wait, all of a sudden, like we have like gold being a thing that can like take down certain characters. Like, what is this? Um, or maybe you can have certain beams or whatever that comes down and like hits, not like proton beams, like just like a beam of light that takes down certain monsters. And I don't know, you could go any numbers of routes with this. Just to eventually like, I would love the whole like little circle like ritual thing that usually is to maybe if an episode is to be with them like going and being against a ghost, maybe you could lock this thing in one location and fight it off, and actually like the ghost would during this circled ritual thing like actually become more of something that this Power Ranger could take down because he's using its power against this ghost to make him seem more uh, of being in the mortal plane. But yeah, but other than that, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of things you could work with this. There's a lot of things that you could like trap certain characters, force them to go away. Or really, there could be some times where you could just figure out like, okay, like maybe this character wants something. Maybe we could reason with it, and maybe it'll go away after that. That happens a lot of times with Ghostbusters. Uh, but anyways, yeah, like it would just be cool to have like do something fun with this, but also just like make it be smart. Like I hope it like doesn't come off to just being like, oh well, there's only so very few things that we can work with this. Like let's try to burn it, or let's try to like put it on fire, or let's try to. Like, I know that's one of the same kind of things. Let's just put it in the light. Yeah, just shove it outside because it's light. Plus, there's also a lot of cool things that you can eventually go with this also, where, like, look at the movie The Midnight Man with Robert Englund, where all of a sudden the Power Rangers is like, okay, we have to channel this monster to eventually come out because it seems like this thing is a consistent threat, so now we have to play its game to eventually beat it. And beat it in only the way that the Power Rangers can. So that would be kind of an interesting kind of story to eventually put out. That's something different. But with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here because this video is probably too long. But I just wanted to have fun with this. I just wanted to do something that just worked my creative muscle. Because I'd done something like this before. So more than likely I might put this in a playlist called Power Ranger Creations or like Power Ranger something. But there'll probably be a playlist of this on the channel, so eventually you can go maybe like Power Rangers Concepts will probably be what it's called. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.